Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on interprofessional collaboration and its impact on patient outcomes. I am Bobby Ramesh, former Group Director of Nursing, India Operations Division, Parkway Pentai Limited. I'm also a Principal Assessor for NABH. I'm indeed privileged to be a moderator for this session today. I'd like to welcome all the eminent panelists who have taken their time out of their busy schedule and joined us from across the country. Dr. Sanjeev Singh from Kochi, Dr. Harish Pillai and Mr. Neeraj Lal from Bangalore, Ms. Deepa Chugh from Delhi, and Dr. Shabnam Singh, who will be joining us shortly. Namaste, everyone. And I'd like to welcome all the participants to this interesting session today. I'd like to share with the participants that at the end of the session, the participants would have a better understanding on what interprofessional collaboration is all about, its importance, the advantages and the barriers of interprofessional collaboration, and how it can improve the productivity among healthcare professionals in healthcare organizations, both in private and public health. Historically, healthcare professionals were educated in silos without knowledge of educational requirements and the scope of practices of other disciplines. And it used to be mostly doctors and nurses, not anymore. Unlike olden days, the modern healthcare organizations are far from one dimensional. There are large varieties of tasks to be performed, and numerous complex and sophisticated specialized skills are involved. As various professionals have different norms and habits, collaboration is very essential for the delivery of efficient healthcare services. WHO asserts that it is no longer enough for healthcare worker to be professional. In the present global climate, a healthcare worker need to be interprofessional too. I'm glad to welcome Dr. Sanjeev Singh, our first panelist, to share his views on interprofessional collaboration. I'd like to introduce Dr. Sanjeev Singh. Dr. Sanjeev Singh is a dynamic medical administrator, a pediatrician by training, has done his PhD in hospital management and infection control, and presently the chief medical superintendent at Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences Kochi and lead projects at Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences Faridabad. He is a principal assessor for NABH and co-chair for research committee NABH. He is also a lead assessor for International Society for Quality and a member of Drug Safety Council at Government of India and chairman of technical committee AHPI. Dr. Sanjeev Singh, over to you. Request you to share your views on what exactly interprofessional collaboration is and what are its advantages, who are the people involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. It is such a pleasure to meet with you again during this post-lockdown period. And thank you all the panelists. It is so great to reconnect. Dr. Harish, Dr. Neeraj, Deepa. And thank you, Voice of Health, for organizing this. This is an interesting subject. Interprofessional collaboration must have been practiced in a more traditional way or more conventional way in many institutions. But this is a term which has been used by Institute of Medicine. And since medicine and healthcare delivery is a complex subject, the Harvard Business Review says that in a tertiary care setup with an average length of stay of 4 days, a patient has close to 32 touch points. And various people who come in and converse or take a decision for a patient, there is likely to have the decision making being untouched. So there is where the interpersonal collaboration, interprofessional collaboration comes into picture. And by definition, anything which is more than two entities which come together for a shared outcome is an interprofessional collaboration. Now, this could be within the organization, this could be between various organizations, this could be between various professions, this could be between countries. This is being in use in clinical practice, and now with advent of newer modalities of education, this has moved into the interprofessional collaboration has moved into education, and we are seeing this phenomenally the education sector adopting and changing, and definitely research, because there is a problem which comes from the clinician, and then various group of people come together to solve that question. So, in nutshell, WHO post that has also adopted it, and then they have given an interim guidance note on interprofessional collaboration. This has tremendous impact on gaining wisdom from other professions, creating new resource. Everybody may not have all the skill sets, thereby it increases the productivity, and then ultimately the outcomes improve. So it is a phenomenal way to deliver care and improve outcomes.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev. The 32 touch points is really something everybody have to think about, and and how they can improve upon collaboration. There are with multifunctions and multiple healthcare team members involved. Really, it's a good info for all of us. Our next speaker is Mr. Neeraj Lal. Mr. Neeraj Lal is a postgraduate in hospital admin from the renowned Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, and with over 18 years of experience. He's currently working as a cluster head and vice president at Rainbow Children's Hospital, Bangalore and Karnataka region. He's an approved surveyor for ISQA's International Accreditation Program. Also, he's a visiting faculty with many universities and business schools for teaching programs in hospital admin and healthcare quality. So I'd request Mr. Neeraj Lal to just share your perspectives on how hospital workflow and day-to-day operations can be improved by interprofessional collaboration. Over to you, Mr. Neeraj. It's on mute. Please unmute. You have to unmute.
Yeah, it's fine. Hello.
Yeah.
I just want to tell about the Rainbow Hospitals. We run a chain of mother and child hospital, and I think the hospital like us require a interprofessional collaboration. I'll give you small examples. We got a culture here, which we used to measure what matters. So what we do in the morning once we start a day, maybe a staff nurse, maybe a biomedical engineers, finance executives, your customer care, we all meet on a monthly basis, and everybody coordinate in the business of the healthcare and the patient care. So they used to, because I feel this coordination among all the professionals is key in order to give a good culture in the hospitals. If you see for the last 2-3 months, everybody is passing through a bad phase. So what we have done, we created a team in which everybody is talking to each other in the form of a task force, and a care has been given by everybody. So I feel in order to achieve a business target or in order to achieve a patient care, there is something known as feedback meetings. So after 48 hours of the patient discharge, a customer care head call each and every patient and used to take a feedback on various parameters, maybe from billing side, maybe from the housekeeping side, from the doctor sides and all. And then every HOD of the hospital, which is leading the vertical, they call all the patient and they take the feedback from them. How can be patient care can improve, what are the shortcomings, so that whenever they are coming, because these patients are coming to us on a continuous basis, maybe for vaccination, and we say 1000 days campaign, baby is born here and the vaccination and so on. So through this coordination meeting and feedback mechanism, every department participates. And when a billing head call to these people for the billing queries, and I think the real feedback you can give when the patient is there at home, and genuine feedback you cannot get while patient is on the bed. So these are the few things which we used to do, and there is a perfect example of interprofessional collaboration in our hospitals.
Thank you, Mr. Neeraj. Patient feedback also is an important aspect of interprofessional collaboration. Dr. Harish Pillai is the next panelist. Dr. Harish Pillai is one of the most influential leaders in Indian healthcare industry. Dr. Harish is presently the Group CEO of Aster DM Healthcare India. He is a member of the Joint Commission International Standards Advisory Panel and a member of Governance Council at AHPI. He is also the National Chair for Medical Value Travel Committee and in Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, a doctor with exemplary leadership skills. Dr. Harish Pillai has vast experience as an administrator and CEO of leading hospitals in India and Dubai. He is also a visiting faculty at renowned institutes like Tata Institute of Social Science and Administrative Staff College of India. I would request Dr. Harish Pillai to share his thoughts on how to improve. I would request Dr. Harish Pillai to share his thoughts on barriers affecting interprofessional collaboration and role of leadership and the importance of collective leadership in interprofessional collaboration. Over to you, Dr. Harish.
Thank you, Bobby. It's a very apt question, at least in the Indian context. Honestly speaking, our biggest barrier is up here. It's our mind. We have a big cultural issue. Look at all of us in this webinar, and we are in a tropical country. I always keep wondering that why, in spite of being in a tropical country, do we lock ourselves in an air-conditioned room and, wear a suit with a tie? I keep wondering about it. And obviously, it's to do with 200 years of colonial, history about that. In healthcare also, somehow we seem to have, it's almost like a cut and paste model. We have looked at what is apt in OECD developed countries and brought it back here. See, truly speaking, when you talk about healthcare, it's a team play where you have a clinician, obviously the doctors there, you have a nurse, you have the paramed, but then they're all equal in a way in terms of delivery of care. Look at the number of times a patient sees a doctor or the number of times he or she looks at a nurse. I mean, you can't even compare the frequency of interaction. Still, the power equations are quite massive. It's not just an issue with India. I think it's an issue with the Occident. The kind of cultural hierarchies where we have in our society, I think somehow it's also being reflected in healthcare. So my vision and my wish is somehow, first of all, for us to introspect and break down the barriers in our mind and apply that in healthcare. I run a publicly listed entity. Aster is listed in the stock exchanges in India. So for us, cost is something which is very important. We are looking at improving manpower productivity in a very big way. Like Neeraj and Sanjeev said before me, we can't afford to look at silos. We have to look at multi-skilling. We have to also go back to our curriculum that, if you've found, like, I love Hindi cinema, especially of the 50s and 60s. And you know that the doctor Chacha who comes with the bag, he's a friend, philosopher and guide to many families, at least as per old Hindi cinema. Where are those Dr. Chachas nowadays? The point I'm trying to say is even medicine those days was multi-skill. You had a very good, well-trained GP who is to attend to a majority of issues. Obviously, if it requires a degree of specialization, then the patient is referred. Unfortunately, there is no gatekeeper concept in our country. Everyone has got access to a specialist or a super specialist. It has got a cost implication, and cost of care, if you truly analyze, has gone up so much. There is also an interesting debate in the public media today that because of COVID forced lockdown, why is it that a lot of elective cases which otherwise were rushing to patients could not be done today? So this is something is worth thinking about. There is some, Dr. Shubnam, I think you'll have to mute, yeah. So this is something which we need to think about. The role of generalist versus specialist is something we have to talk about, not only in the medical hierarchy, but in the way we run our hospitals. Curriculum design, I think my good friend Sanjeev is there. He's a highly respected mentor and also an academician of repute. I think, when we have a conversation with the Board of Governors, which is now governing medical curriculum and education in India, or also go to the Nursing Council and other councils, we have to really think out of the box, the way we train youngsters today. You know, the silo-based approach, if we go so much, I'm afraid we will become extinct because machines will take over our jobs. Even though we might say that, yeah, it's a high-touch kind of an environment where healthcare is concerned, don't be so sure. My greatest fear is that in our lifetime, we will find intelligent machines, possibly humanoids, coming and taking over our precious jobs the way we see, unless we change paradigms and try and reinvent this whole philosophy of being generalist. This concept of interdisciplinary collaboration, in my mind, comes within, which is actually not. Sanjeev said that it's beyond one. My point of view is actually starts with one, then only it goes beyond that too. So that I rest my case then. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, Dr. Harish. Lot of inputs, cultural issues, hierarchy issues are a concern, and too many disciplines these days, because of which the curriculum needs to be relooked into for improving the interprofessional collaboration. Our next panelist is a young and dynamic nurse leader from Delhi, Ms. Deepa Chugh, who has done her MPhil in nursing with 17 years of experience in various capacities in clinical, teaching, and administrative domains of nursing. Ms. Deepa is also an NABH assessor and has published various scientific papers in national and international journals. So, Ms. Deepa, please unmute yourself. And
yeah,
I would request you to share your thoughts on why it is so important for nursing, this interprofessional collaboration, because they are an integral part of healthcare. On a day-to-day basis, they need to interact with various departments and many members of the team. So why it is so important? Could you please share your views on that?
Thank you, Ms. Bobby, and it's my pleasure to be amongst the galaxy of intellectuals today here. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have a presentation, but my screen, which I'm not able to share it, if I can.
Okay. You have to scroll down and then you have to share your screen. If it is not
I have
possible,
done so. Wait, just a second.
Yeah.
Is it seen?
Not yet. Yeah, it is.
It is? Yeah. So I think all the panelists has made it very easy for me to now put my aspect, which I would only talk about the nursing part of it, how as nurses we have to be a contributing member of this interprofessional team. When we talk about what is my role, what my role as a nurse would be, so when a patient comes to a doctor's clinic, it would be the diagnosis and the prescription, but how to help this patient. Say if a patient comes and the doctor has advised for taking insulin and to reduce weight. Now the patient has a big question, how? So that is where I think the nurse's role come, and the entire of our purview of our work would depend upon. And one of the panelists has already spoken about the paradigm shift. I would just say that the Dr. Chacha was there previously with us, and as in the today's date, we have interdisciplinary teams wherein we are working together and coming to one single conclusion. We are talking about interprofessional, wherein every member of the team, what very rightly projected by Mr. Neeraj also, that every member, be it from the billing, be it from the IT, the nursing team, the medical team, everyone collaborates. They have their own voice. Their voice are being taken up for business perspective as well as quality patient care. Some basic ingredient when we form a team would be the role clarity. Something like when we play a cricket match or anything, the wicketkeeper knows what exactly he's supposed to be doing. The bowler knows, the batter knows, everyone knows what exactly. So we have to first frame the role clarity, otherwise there would be clashes. And that is where, the diversities would always come into play, and we have conflicts arising in the team. trust and confidence without which the team would never be built in, and ability to overcome differences, uh, differences of various form. As already, I think Dr. Harish had already elaborated on that, that educational background, the cultural diversities which we all come from, has to be merged into altruism state where we are keeping the patient first. Leadership, I'll be talking about in the next of my slide, and um the ability to overcome adversities of various fields. I think this is already covered. My main target would be on nursing competencies. When we say that we as nurses have to be a contributory member, what are the things which we have to take forward and what we have to practice to be a contributory member of this interprofessional team would be our leadership, wherein mainly leadership roles nurses have to taken in the form of briefing the team how we are supposed to be working. See, because in nursing also, even when today we work in ICU or in at bedside in the wards, we are working in nursing teams as well as then the other healthcare members like the dietitians, the physiotherapists, the doctors, consultant, resident doctors, everyone come into play. So we become a sole point through which the team works around. And that's why the briefing, what we are looking at for every patient is very, very important. If someone is facing any issues in between, we need to help them out, and debriefs also, whether we have achieved what we are able to achieve, what we in a nutshell call it as our dashboards. Coming to a communication, my personal perspective of communication would be whenever we are dealing with professionals, it is always better to use tools of communication rather than being very, very vague on our communication. Say for example, if we have to collaborate with the dietitian or a physiotherapist or a doctor, then we all are using ISBAR method. There are various handover methods, other which we can use like pass the baton, anticipate. So if we have these kind of tools available for our team members so that the communication is very, very effective and it's up to the point and there are least errors, because there has been enormous number of studies which say that communication errors can land up into serious deleterious effect to the patient care as well as the quality of the care given to the patient. Situational monitoring is nothing but, you can put it like what the in charges are doing in the ward. They are just being in the system, they know what is happening, who has told what, by attending various rounds, knowing for the patient. Not only for the patient, today we are talking about families and communities also. So situation monitoring is collaborative of all the aspect of the patient, their family, psychological aspect, as well as today if we talk about even the transport comes into situational monitoring, whether the patient's relative would actually be able to come, how they would travel, all those things also would be coming into play. Mutual support is nothing but we coordinating with each other or having concern for each other, having concern for the patient. And if we have any difficulties, then establishing to say that I am uncomfortable if this particular thing is done for the patient, or putting up my perspective that you can say that safety is an issue. So I have to establish my voice in a team when I work as a nurse.
Thank you, Ms. Deepa. Thank you, Ms. Deepa. I think some connectivity issues, will get back. Yes, as Ms. Deepa told, communication tools are effective for better interprofessional collaboration, and role clarity is very much required for an effective interprofessional collaboration. Even the Joint Commission Accreditation in the United States have released a report in 2003. I've read that 60% of
Hello?
The
Yeah.
60
Yes. I
60% of the critical events or sentinel events have been caused due to communication errors or ineffective communication. So thank you. I'll get back to you again. Our next panelist is Dr. Shabnam Singh, one of the most eminent personalities in Indian healthcare, with 4 decades of rich experience in healthcare sector, spanning across roles such as practicing clinician, healthcare management and administration, capacity building, skilling, and healthcare governance. Dr. Shabnam Singh is presently advisor to CII National Healthcare Council and governing board member at Healthcare Sector Skill Council and Life Sciences Sector Skill Council. Dr. Shabnam is also a consultant emeritus at Max Healthcare Limited. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Shabnam. Glad to meet you. And I would request you to share your perspectives on interprofessional collaboration and also to share your views on the role of interprofessional collaboration between public and private health. Over to you.
Thank you, Namaskar. Thank you for having me here. It's good to see you, Harish and Abuf, friends on the panel. I think one of the nice things about being the last is everything is said, so there's very little left to add to the discussion. But since you've asked me some very specific points, I'll try to address them as much as I can. So to the point, and I think Harish brought it out well, like when you're running whether it's a small or a large institution, to have people work together is extremely important, not only because you need to have a team approach to taking care of patients, but at the end of the day today, or any time, you also have to look at the finances of your system, right? And in that piece, traditionally, you've always been fixed into nurses and doctors, and each one of them in their own pieces multitasked and double-hatted, triple-hatted to make things happen. Gradually over a period of time, and it has not been easy, because if you have something, it's very difficult to give it. You are very happy to take something, but when you have to give up something, it's far more difficult. And in all my years seeing across the world as well as in India, it's been no different, that if you tell doctors who've been managers, okay, I'm going to get you a manager and I'm going to get you somebody to handle your marketing, they are extremely reluctant to let go of that fiefdom. The same thing applies for nurses. So it's instinctive. You want to embrace everything and hold on to it. So if you really want to juice out, or you want to really make interprofessional, interdisciplinary work together, there must be an element of giving up something. Only then can somebody take it from you. If you're not ready to give it up, it is not going to happen. That's point number 1. Point number 2, it is very, very important that everybody understands that the days in which the doctor and the nurse were the penultimate is not true. As you move out and move into digitalization, their place will always be there. It is totally protected, but the universe has become much larger. You take our current example itself, and that addresses to your public-private participation. Look at the COVID crisis. The success of this COVID crisis and taking people out of it lies both within the hospital as well as outside the hospital. It's both people. So Kerala has, and hats off to everybody in Kerala, the success of the entire piece has lay in contact tracing, tracking, and quarantining people, right? And thereby it has de-escalated the need within the system to be able to take care of patients. So this is a perfect example of making things happen in which the skill sets of the individual people are utilized to the benefit of all. So what I would sincerely urge practitioners who are on this panel and outside, look at what you're doing. What is it that is core to your profession? Look at what is core to your profession and see what is it that you can take out. We did this exercise in Max, and I've done it for many other organizations, in saying, okay, this is core to the individual, this is not core to the individual. So when it's not core to the individual, then you look out, and there's a question on your chat box about other industries walking into it. That's a very, very valid point. That's exactly what we did when we started out, in which we got people from hospitality and airline industry. The airline industry, as far as quality management is concerned, is par excellence, right? All our quality management processes, etc., have gained from there. So essentially, what I'm trying to share with everybody is, if you want to make a success of interdisciplinary work, and you want to make sure that your balance sheets are kosher, you have to look at each and every, slice it down. This is core to me. For instance, what Dr. Deepa said, that I have to look after transport. Now, why should she look after transport? That can easily be taken care of by a counselor, right? So the nurse's protected time remains in the area where she is, right? So this kind of self-discipline has to come from within the people. And the same thing applies to doctors and so on and so forth. To your point of public-private participation, in the current context, and I'll limit myself here because PPPs are, it's like an ocean out there, right? The biggest example would be what has been done in Mumbai with Reliance taking over Seven Hills. And an extended version of that is what has happened in Gurgaon. So in Gurgaon, for the COVID crisis, taking over a private hospital by a group of private institutions, coming collectively together to ramp it up immediately to take care of COVID patients, along with bringing in funders who have nothing to do with medicine or even healthcare in any form or fashion. That is the kind of collaboration that is required today across the board. And I sincerely hope that this will not be just limited to the bonhomie or the need for people to do something in this pandemic, but hopefully this will be a sustained movement in which there will be stakeholder engagement beyond the traditional people who want to get into healthcare. Because if you look at the challenges of delivering healthcare and the cracks which have, it's not as if people didn't know that these cracks in the healthcare system existed earlier, but you could manage to put your Fevicol and your Band-Aids over the cracks. Going forward, it's going to be far more difficult because citizenry is going to ask both the public and the private sector some very tough questions. And when they ask those tough questions, it is better to be prepared to answer them, or at least to give a semblance that, yes, we do know this is the problem and this is how we plan to work together. And here, again, I'll go back, as I was mentioning in another call in Kerala, that the strength of the primary and ensuring that individuals themselves become responsible for their care is hugely, hugely important. So I hope, Bobby, I've been able to explain myself well enough and added something to the conversation. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Dr. Shabnam, for your valuable inputs. And as Dr. Shabnam has said, this public-private partnership or collaboration should not only be there during this COVID time, and it should continue even after the COVID crisis is over, and it should be strengthened as well. Also, the utilization of skill sets of individual team members should be to the fullest for a better interprofessional collaboration. Thank you once again, Dr. Shabnam. And I'd like to ask Mr. Neeraj, how interprofessional collaboration helps in healthcare cost reduction?
See, I'll just give you one example. In most of the hospital in the ward, there is a nurse call management system. So whenever you got an issue in the floors, in the patient rooms, maybe housekeeping or a maintenance, so always a nurse goes inside the room and she used to address the problem. So what we have attempted in one of the hospitals in Bangalore, we have started a 4-point care management system. So whenever a patient require a housekeeping, instead of a one button, there is four button. So you press a housekeeping button, and there is a tat which is mentioned on his bed. Okay, within 3 minutes and within 5 minutes, somebody will come. Similarly for F&B and maintenance. So we have seen over a period of time, 33% of the time the staff nurse used to spend going to the patient room and attending the call is wasted. So they are only focusing on patient care. So all other people like maintenance and housekeeping and F&B, so instead of getting a call from a staff nurse, straight away they're getting a call from the patient room through a 4-point care system. So it has drastically reduced the time of a staff nurse to spend more time on a patient care rather than spending time on all those things. Some of the example what we have done, like our PLL manager from the NICU and PICU is not a business manager. She's a staff nurse. So she's taking care of patient care also. At the same time, she's responsible for the PNL of neonatal ICU and PICU. So if I have seen over a period of time, if you empower them and if you give them a good technology base and support, they can make a difference. And as a result, our NICU business and a PICU business has gone more, quite more. So these are the few examples which are attempting in our hospitals.
Thank you, Mr. Neeraj. You said your PL, PICU, NICU is the responsibility of the nurse in charge there, and they need to be empowered. So earlier too, Dr. Harish mentioned about cultural and hierarchy issues in our country, especially, and that is very much there, especially in nursing. But however, things have changed slightly over the past few years, thanks to NABH, that nursing professionals are involved in various committees in the hospital for decision making and various activities. But still, things have to improve, and empowerment also needs improvement. So I would request Ms. Deepa Chugh to share your views on empowerment in nursing and also for other healthcare professionals for an effective interprofessional collaboration, because many a times you see, compared to developed countries in India, nurses cannot share their ideas or concerns, especially with the doctors. Though they collaborate with all other departments, they are a bit hesitant or they lack confidence, or even the doctors may not like them sharing any concerns or clarifying that. And also, if a clinical pharmacologist or a pharmacist, for example, cannot question, they are only doing audits on antibiotic policy and rational prescription. If there is a concern with a particular consultant writing which is not in the antibiotic policy, they do not have an empowerment. So what is the importance of empowerment in interprofessional collaboration? Over to you, Ms. Deepa. Please unmute. Please unmute.
Yeah. So I would say that when we say about empowerment cannot be given. It has to be attained. And if we have to be a contributory member of this team, then we not only in the clinical field, we have to be making our patient first. If it is only to have an argument, we argue, that would be incorrect and no one would listen to anyone, be it a nurse, be it a clinical pharmacist or anyone. It has to be the patient's benefit first put forward, and then we also have to be ready to take any kind of challenges coming forth. The third very important aspect, which because you emphasized on nursing, that if we put forward our views, people are not, or we, first of all, how many nurses are putting their views forward? That is a question. And I would say in that perspective that our education system has to be changed. From the very beginning in the education system, it has been told to follow orders. So it is time for us, and yes, the Indian Nursing Council has very well taken this and the curriculum has been changed for the graduate nurses. So from the very beginning, they are supposed to be informed and their role clarity has to be clear. It cannot happen that it was a olden day perspective that you are supposed to take orders and follow those. So if that changes from the grassroots, from the education side, and when these nurses, when they come to the clinical area, and if you have found out certain people who are able to theorize as well as catheterize, I would say, then what Mr. Neeraj said, that there are nurses who have come forward. Even here, I would give example of my own hospital. In the COVID ward, as well as in the COVID ICU, there is no doctor at all. there are only 2 nurses, and we have a video conferencing system. There is a control room. Everything is being monitored, and whenever required, a team of only 3 people would go inside, because the number of people entering these zones have to be very, very minimized. And believe me, whatever we have small experience in these past few months we have got, it is brilliant. So it is the diversities which would give us these opportunities to come forward, and we should have grit to come forward, take these challenges up, and then accept it. No one would come and give you the empowerment. We have to attain it. As a nurse, I would just say that, not only for my nursing personnels, but also for the other healthcare professionals. And it is not that it is not being heard, it has to be put at the right time and with the right intention. Over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Deepa. You mentioned very well said, diversity gives us opportunities and empowerment has to come from within. And glad to know that Indian Nursing Council is revising the nursing curriculum and their syllabus as well, and giving importance to this empowerment aspect. Also, I'd like to know, in your hospital, you do not have a college attached. You have a master's degree in nursing in cardiothoracic specialization.
Yes.
So having an integrated teaching in your hospital, has it helped improve interprofessional collaboration among your team members?
I would say definitely. One, because the syllabus in the very beginning of the year is being distributed, and not only distributed topic wise, but I would say the medical aspect of it is being taken care by, or being trained by specialists who are available in the hospital. Then on those same topics, the nursing aspect are being taken care by the nurses. So it is not that if hypertension is being taught, then from the top to the bottom, hypertension is being taught by one individual. It is the medical specialist who is teaching the basic pathophysiology. The pathologist is teaching them about how the changes would occur in the body, and then the nursing aspect would teach them holistic nursing care, how can you give, and lifestyle modification pertaining to exercise and diet are being trained by the physiotherapist and the nutritionist. So this is one simple example I'm giving you in their training aspect. But when they come for research purpose, when they come for clinical practice, every individual in the hospital is coming forward and training them, because they have come out to be a very contributory member, and they take bedside they are there taking care of the patient. It's not that it is just for 4 hours or 3 hours they would come. They are there for the entire duty. So when the doctors and the other healthcare teams have seen that they are working full time and they are giving their views very professionally, and their assessment to the patients are accurate, then they come forward to teach them also, as well as I would say their research perspective has grown multiple folds. We have done various researches which are intercollaborative as well as interdisciplinary, interprofessional in nature. I cannot put it right now, but definitely it can be shared at a different platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deepa, for the inputs. Nice to know that integrated approach of doing a specialization in nursing in the hospitals is more effective because consultants are involved. I'm an alumni of College of Nursing, AFMC Pune, and even at a graduation level, it used to be like that. All the senior professors in medicine as well as in nursing are involved in our classes, right? In taking our classes or exams, everything from first year till the fourth year. So it makes a lot of difference in upgrading our skills and knowledge as well, and our confidence level also. My next question would be to Dr. Sanjeev Singh. Dr. Sanjeev is a chief medical administrator at Kochi. I had been an administrator in one of the medical college in Kerala, medical college hospital. Any meetings for any decision making, it used to be conflicts, and conflicts. Everybody to come into a consensus it used to take time, and it used to be very difficult to convince all the HODs, and the hierarchy issues were massive. It was not easy to handle these hierarchy issues. So it was something new for me when I worked in a medical college hospital. So I would request Dr. Sanjeev to share your views on interprofessional conflict resolution and how to promote interprofessional collaboration in teaching hospital, especially like yours, in such a big setup with so many disciplines and so many HODs. How do you tackle all of them?
Thanks, Bobby. Very interesting and difficult question. Being in a
There's some connectivity issues. There's a connectivity issue from your side, Dr. Sanjeev. There's a connectivity issue. I would request you to log out and log in. And meanwhile, I'll revert back to you. My next question to Dr. Harish Pillai.
College.
I'll revert back to you.
You get sorry, I got disconnected.
Yeah.
Shall I go on?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, you can.
I was mentioning that the effort in Kerala, as Dr. Harish would agree, it becomes twice or thrice to get the conflict resolution done among all the faculty members, more so in a medical college setup, because they are very, very senior professors who come from various backgrounds, and they possibly would have not seen this kind of an approach. But I think the leadership and the culture which you set in an organization has a lot of value. So if there is, since the beginning, if you promote that culture, that there is no single doctor who owns the patient, the hospital owns it. And then there is, everybody needs to come together to take a uniform decision, which would be in the interest of the patient. Here, I would like to give an example from our institute. We run a very decent pediatric cardiac care service. And this is something which is exemplary. So there is where there is a very high degree of interprofessional collaboration which takes place. So the pediatric cardiologist, pediatric cardiac surgeon, the intensivist, the anesthetist who was there the previous day or maybe the same day, the nurse who's looking after the patient, the clinical pharmacist of pediatric cardiac care services, the dietitian of pediatric cardiac care, and if there are any quality care or infection prevention person. So all of them, they round together. So what happens is why the cost of care increases, and why there is disparity in communication, and why there is so many opinions, because unfortunately medicine is like that. So if you want to give beta blockers for a patient of coronary artery disease, because beta blockers are cardioprotective, there are similar studies which says that it is cardioprotective. There are similar studies, a similar number of studies which says that it leads to mortality. So unfortunately medicine is like this, and we don't have an habit to get into systematic reviews and meta-analysis. So there is where to resolve this conflict, to have one decision, clinical decision, and communicate this to the bystanders and to the patient. A joint round is perfect, because if you have to take decisions regarding antibiotic increase, decrease, de-escalation, you take it there, because it's very difficult. The physician may understand it, but the surgeons may not, and he would like to, because he thinks the surgery is best. And most of the surgeons are more bothered about complication rates rather than infection rates. So they are very bothered about what they did yesterday, and they would like to have that in perfection. So if you have to take decisions with respect to IV fluid, so there is on ventilation, you want to maintain a positive balance or you want to negative. So all decisions, if everybody are coming together, and the nurse is the best person because she basically is there. The rest of the team has just arrived. The clinical pharmacist immediately takes care of the dosing. So if it's de-escalation, it's dosing improper. The dietitian immediately mentions whether to start the NG feed or to what level, because you immediately, it is coming from the clinicians, and then they know how much protein, how much lipid, which generally is not the story. And so and the intensivist is there to follow it up for the rest of the day. So it is a fantastic example, and we took this to the next step. We said that interprofessional collaboration is perfect. We have now are collaborating with 93 countries, and then there is an IQIC project which is there, which is run by Boston Children's Hospital, and then you can match whether your interprofessional collaboration has an impact and it is a positive outcome. You can match it. So what we have seen is that this whole approach and the culture is phenomenal. There are positive outcomes. It helps education. It helps reduce cost of care. It brings in the conflicts which is generally there, because everybody would take rounds at different point of time and also communicated differently. So there may be intensivist communicates differently, pediatric cardiac service communicates differently, the surgeon communicates differently, and the nurse, when she is called, communicates it differently. So once, if there is one particular round at one point of time, one communication which goes out, the satisfaction rates are good, and I think all outcomes are good.
Can you tell any examples of how to measure the impact of interprofessional collaboration in patient outcome?
So when you are doing, I'll just take this example. So maybe another example regarding our antibiotic stewardship program. So when the ID physician or an IPC and the intensivist or the surgeons are doing round, and there's a clinical pharmacist and the nurse who is empowered to do this, communicate it properly and take appropriate decisions. So what we have seen it, and we have published it thoroughly, is that the morbidity mortality reduces. So if we say our stewardship, when we the compliance of adherence of SOPs are very, very good. The mortality, the length of days have reduced, the mortalities have reduced, the cost of care for the patient is reduced, the patient satisfaction is much better. So overall, I think the whole compliance towards what you want to lay down as good processes do improve. The readmission rates are much better. The complications rates are much better, because you do rounding together, you come to a particular single decision making, you can take a decision whether to extubate. There is a lot of problems with respect to extubation and reintubation, because surgeon wants to just have another 4 hours or maybe one more day, and may not be required, because it's a device which is in situ, leading to more complications. So if all decisions are taken place, the cost of care comes down. So every bit of indicator which you capture within the hospital, especially in intensive care unit, improves.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev. Nice to know that your hospital is having collaboration with 93 countries, and with antibiotic stewardship, morbidity and mortality, length of stay, and has improved. Also, the patient satisfaction. Here, I'd like to share that in one of my previous hospital, we had introduced this multidisciplinary team rounds every day morning without fail from 10 o'clock to 12:30. The medical nursing head and operations head, along with the dietitian, F&B manager, a biomedical equipment guy, and a housekeeping supervisor, everyone goes for rounds together, and they meet all the critical patients and also the discharged patients. And we could demonstrate that this multidisciplinary rounds on a daily basis could bring down patient complaints to a large extent, and also improve the patient satisfaction, and also to a great extent staff satisfaction also, because when you go on rounds, not only for the patient, you interact with the staff on ground as well, be it the doctors, nurses, or other healthcare workers. So it is more of an employee rounding as well, so it improves their satisfaction level as well. Thank you so much. And my next question would be to Dr. Harish Pillai. Dr. Harish, how to improve the culture of interprofessional collaboration, especially with all these cultural and hierarchy issues still there, though whatever all said and done, For this to be changed, it will take some time. So how to improve the culture of interprofessional collaboration, and what strategies have you put in place in your group of hospitals for improving interprofessional collaboration, especially during this present crisis?
Thanks, Bobby. You know, a few comments on my previous speaker. So I was very impressed with Deepa's statements, and when she was saying mentally, I was thinking that, oh my God, she's like Jhansi Ki Rani. You know, you can't just sit quietly, go out and grab. So hats off to you, Deepa. I think, you know, all power to you, and that's the way it ought to be. Dr. Sanjeev also mentioned some fascinating points, and I know the kind of work which Amrita does, and the fact he's too modest, by the way, and I must say that Sanjeev has gone beyond his institution and actually helped the state of Kerala for having a large-scale statewide antibiotic surveillance thing. So this is something which both Sanjeev and his fantastic team and Amrita has done for the state of Kerala. There are also very interesting points which Dr. Shabnam had talked about. The era of embracing technology, you know, this that's a completely new dimension, which actually breaks down many of these silos what we spoke about. But coming to your question, it all reflects on leadership, Bobby. Look at a hospital like Sanjeev's example, what he talked about, that medical college hospital, right? Can we all honestly say that any two department is the same? Of course not. You will have exceptionally well-run teams, and you will have average departments, and some are very poor departments. Why is it that? It's all to do with leadership. It could be the dean, it could be the department head, and it boils down to the... So honestly speaking, this paradigm challenge, we will have to look at a structural mechanism to teach people. Management is a science. You know, one of the dreams which I have is that if we have all the senior doctors, especially the clinical faculties, having some degree of an MBA, you know, an exposure to management sciences, it will open them to a completely new horizon of scientifically managing limited resources. To give you one example from, for example, from the Indian Armed Forces, you know, people talk about that India's expenditure to defense should be at maybe 5% of our GDP. We also say that in healthcare, coincidentally, but it has never been. The highest ever I can imagine was when Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister. Our defense budget, that was the time when General Sundarji was the army chief, where the expenditure towards defense slightly climbed up. But that's impossible, like for a developing country like ours, and correctly so, COVID has shown how creaky the health system is. We have these competing demands for the limited resources what we have. So what has the armed forces done? They have just gone and broken apart the silo approach towards defense. So you have this integrated command. Now we have the CDS, the Chief of Defense Staff, which is talking about integrated commands, which would have elements of armored corps, you would have air defense, you would have infantry divisions, you will have air support, everything together. And he was so radical in even suggesting that well, the naval air arm, why should it be in the oceans? Why can't you deploy the MiG-29Ks from the aircraft carriers in the northern sector? Something very interesting from the armed forces. So when you look at that, to the question, what you said is that it is extremely important in the context of limited budgets for private hospitals, that you have X amount of budgets. And, you know, to give you one number, all of us in the private health sector, we are struggling to ensure that our HR cost as a percentage to top line is 40%, if not less than that. Now, if you really want to achieve 40% or between 35 to 40%, your HR cost, unless you crack, you know, break down these silos and have multidisciplinary teams, cross-functional teams, you're not going to achieve that. So the first thing you have to do is invest in leadership. Some of it has to be a mandate. It has to come right from the promoters itself. The vision statement itself should say that in order to achieve certain goals, your strategic goals, you need to mandatorily do these things. You can't, even though we all claim to be democratic in approach, sometimes a little bit less democracy is, I think, the need of the hour where healthcare reformation is concerned. So it has to be a top-down approach. You'll have to go in and break down those. Some people will not be happy because they refuse to change. And that's what Deepa's point was, like be Jhansi ki Rani. In some situations, you'll have to just go and grab by force and restructure the environment. Over to you, Bobby.
Thank you, Dr. Harish Pillai. Rightly said, invest in leadership. Yeah, if the leadership is effective, accordingly, interprofessional collaboration will be effective too. And there is a need for cross-functional or multidimensional approach to delivering healthcare services. Just a minute. My next question is to Dr. Sanjeev Singh. Whether any innovations or research initiatives can be done during this COVID crisis or post-COVID, and if you can share some examples.
So even despite all limited resources, even for research, interpersonal collaboration is going to be the disruptor. So I will give you an example of our neurosurgeon used to say that when he does a neuro-onco surgery, some of the patients do come back 6 weeks, 6 months with a residual mass. So, and then he needs to revisit and redo the surgery. So we have a big research program where people who have a problem, they all come together. So the engineer, because we run an engineering college, engineers come together, biotech, nanomedicines come together, the nursing group comes together, and the surgical, and then they say that this is my problem. So what do I do? And very interestingly, the biotech and the nanotech guys says, why don't we develop something which we can keep, which keeps destroying the cells, and you need not do a redo surgery. So they developed a nano textile, which is a polyfiber, and they dipped it into a cytotoxic material. So post surgery, they put a cytotoxic nanofiber material, which is bioabsorbable. So post surgery, it keeps killing the cell. And then we have seen that the readmission of the redos have come down. So what I'm trying to make a point is that a single team or a single person would not be able to make a difference in clinical practice, more so in research, because it is so demanding. So to your question, so here everybody needs to come together and to find a solution, because solutions are not very easy. To your question with respect to COVID and post-COVID, again, so one, you need to have a virus to do anything in any of the setup, because the live virus needs to be there if you want to develop a vaccine or you want to do a test. So possibly you could do a rapid point of care testing as a research focus, or you could do an antigen testing or an antibody testing kit, or develop a vaccine, or develop a drug, or a new a clinical trial where the new antivirals make an impact. But you won't be able to do it all by yourself. You need to go through those small, first the project phase, then the small animal, then the big animal, then the human trials, and then the marketing. So all this is interprofessional collaboration where everybody needs to come together. So for example, we wanted to develop an antigen detection kit, because that would be point of care. Antibody kit would be for COVID, comes at 9th and 10th day. So here again, there was a call for collaboration from ICMR. And here again, the biotechnology came together, the nanomedicine came together, the internal medicine came together, the surgical team came together, and said that, and definitely the leadership came together, because you need to get this virus. You cannot just do it because you just want to build it. So the leadership develops that network to get the virus through all those protocol, and then various kinds of diagnostic point of care testing kits needs to be developed. So there is immense possibilities if interprofessional collaboration puts in efforts and come together. The outcomes are better, and you will definitely develop new kits. There are multiple examples. If time permit, I can share with respect to research, but this is what I would say in the interest of the time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanjeev, for your valuable inputs. And I would request any of the expert panelists if you all want to add anything else. Anything else? Dr. Harish?
See, I have one point to say that if at all there's a light in the tunnel, silver lining from COVID cases, is that we need to basically learn. Each of us have learned it the hard way in terms of managing either clinical challenges or even physical challenges. The state of hospitals in the country, there are large amount of shutdowns, unfortunately, of smaller and moderate type hospitals because they just can't meet the expenditure of increased PPEs, for example. So the cost of care also has gone up. So in this complexity, I think there is a silver lining of gleaning best practices. And at many forums, we are trying to share this knowledge. It's like a knowledge exchange forum where each one of us is trying to help other one. So that spirit and what Dr. Shobnam talked about, the Gurgaon example is fantastic, where a lot of private competitors have actually come together to set up this COVID hospital. They've also brought in innovatively some funders and payers for that model. That's really amazing. I think these kind of case studies, if this country from a minimal PPE production sometime in March, now we are the world's second largest producer of PPEs. It's incredible. So I feel that the post-COVID India definitely is going to be a medical superpower. And one big wish list for the present government is to massively, open up the wallet strings. I know the purse is small, but still try and put more into healthcare. Healthcare ought to be a strategic sector. And like I talked about, 5% of GDP need to go into that. That's my thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Harish. And over to Mr. Neeraj.
I think Dr. Pillai is very right. Government have spent around 15,000 crore in the healthcare sectors. I think in these 2 months, because we need to face COVID, I think in the term of ventilators, in the term of biomedical equipment, we are geared up. So I think it is a good time because I was always feel 4,000 crore in Pradhan Mantri scheme and now 15,000 crore into the healthcare. It will change the way the healthcare will work.
Thank you, Mr. Neeraj. Ms. Deepa,
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to say or ask any of the panelists?
I would just say that the healthcare needs to be expanded from the boundaries of the hospitals to the families and the communities. Because even in the what we see right now in the private division, our main emphasis is on curative part. So the emphasis now should shift, as what Dr. Harish has already emphasized on, that the moment the GDP increases, obviously then the private partnership also, which will be there, should go over to the preventive part of it and should reach the communities rather than only pertaining to the curative aspect and in the four boundaries of the hospital. From my side, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deepa. Dr. Sanjeev, please unmute. Anything you'd like to say or add?
Yeah, two things is I'm very fond of nursing staff and the whole group because they are fantastic, very obedient, and you love them because they just listen to you and they are ready to do. The interprofessional collaboration, if I have to say, has tremendous impact on nursing. What happens is every physician and surgeon comes at a different round. They will criticize the other physician for taking a decision and they will blast a nurse. And the nurse, if she does or she doesn't do, then the nurse, unfortunately, is a very battered group and a butchered group. And because the physicians are not talking to each other, and the rest of the clinical, the allied health science is not talking to each other. So respiratory therapist, the echo technician, the radiology technician, and in the whole course, the nurse gets butchered because she's unfortunately there on that particular shift, and there is a letdown reflex. So if there is a collaborative approach, nurse is extremely peaceful, and it has an impact. Second point I would like to make is we run a research collaboration with the UK, South Africa, Rwanda, and India, and so we don't have the skills. So we take for interprofessional collaboration, we don't know anything about ethnography and sociograms. There's fantastic new science. So we are learning from South Africa. Rwanda, we are learning from Rwanda because we don't have those skill sets. You cannot have all the knowledge on the earth. So we are learning from UK, we're learning from Rwanda, because those skill sets are not available. And then there is a common knowledge platform, and then it has its impact. So it is extremely, extremely valuable. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev Singh, especially on that point on let down reflex among nurses. Point to be noted, Ms. Deepa, I think later we can do a research on this as well, how that can be improved. And I'd like to thank all the wonderful panelists for a very interesting and insightful session. There have been a lot of takeaways. The main points I'd like to say that cooperation, coordination, and communication are the 3 C's which are very essential for an effective interprofessional collaboration in healthcare. And leadership also plays a very important role, as Dr. Harish Pillai has said. An integrated, collaborative, and cross-functional approach is the need of the hour, especially during this present crisis and way forward too. So I'd like to conclude by saying that when there's teamwork and collaboration, wonderful things can be achieved. Now the session is open for question and answers. There have been a lot of nice inputs by Dr. Shabnam Singh, Dr. Sanjeev Singh, Dr. Harish Pillai, Mr. Neeraj Lal, and Ms. Deepa Chugh. Thank you so much for that. There are a few questions which has come from the participants. This question is to Dr. Harish. How to put personal differences aside to overcome adversity?
You want an honest answer, you need Sadhguru. Seriously. It's all to do with ego management. The root conflict is not the other person, it's actually yourself. So if you learn to suppress ego, I think most issues in the world, planet will be resolved. And it's no surprise when you look around the world that the countries who have managed COVID well, they all have women prime ministers. Something for us menfolk to think about. What do you say, Sanjeev? Something for us to think about.
I'm always so impressed with Dr. Harish because he brings in so valuable insights which we have never thought about. I never thought that there are women prime ministers who are doing so good in COVID countries. Super.
Thank you, Dr. Harish. And my next question is to to Mr. Neeraj. How do you build trust and confidence among teammates?
If we participate them in the decision-making process, like say, for example, whenever we made the budget for the year, I have seen budget is made in the boardroom. But if we ask every doctors, every nurse, every strategic business unit, vertical HODs to come and participate, if they buy in the numbers, I think then budget is achievable. So participation is very, very key. If we involve all the vertical HODs in the decision-making process of the hospital, I think it will change the way that we work in the hospitals.
Thank you, Mr. Neeraj. And there is one more interesting question which has come from a neurologist to all the panelists. I'll just read it out. As a neurologist and headache specialist working in, it's from Dr. Praveen Thomas. As a neurologist and headache specialist working in a UK NHS University Hospital with 40,000 employees, I've seen how well collaborations work effectively. A pragmatic approach within hospitals, both in the private and public sector hospitals in India, is to reduce the trust deficit among a significantly confused public. My questions to the panelists is, how would you create a level of information dissemination among the public between hospitals, public initiatives, and government? Public initiatives, government machinery, advocacy groups. So I would request Dr. Sanjeev to answer this question. How would you create a level of information dissemination among the public between hospitals, public health initiatives, government machinery, and advocacy groups?
So I think, the best example is from the group which he belongs to. Headache and migraine again is an interprofessional collaborative approach, because unfortunately it has so much of ramifications, and every team needs to come together. Now, to answer the question is, you have to create registry. No, it's not easy. There is a cancer registry which works, there is a stroke registry which works, there is an NCD registry which works, and so that there is, and now this COVID registry which is working. Unfortunately, the data is for COVID is with ICMR, and very skeletal data is available in COVID India updates. But when you create a registry, this is where the public, private, government, everybody participates, and you would know what works, what doesn't work. So then you can renegotiate on your approach, change your SOPs, because it is not bringing those outcomes which is important. But getting that format ready when everybody buys in together, and then collect data which is honest data, and then submit to this registry, and then there is adequate mining, adequate analytics, adequate warehousing, and adequate data-driven decision making, it will have a tremendous impact. In our country, unfortunately, we have very, very limited experience. So I don't know whether I have completely answered. I will leave it to Dr. Harish to kindly add a few more things.
Any other points to be added, Dr. Harish?
Yeah, what Sanjeev said is very important. In addition to registry, we need to make serious efforts to focus on clinical outcomes. We don't have a national registry of clinical outcomes. So one wonders if NABH would like to take the responsibility, at least for the accredited hospitals, to start publishing on a neutral portal, clinical outcomes, specialty-wise, doctor-wise, or hospital-wise, and give the choice to the informed consumer where he or she would like to go. That's one point. Number two, in terms of removing the trust deficit, that this is something many of us worry about quite a bit. There has to be greater degree of transparency. One is that people do not understand the costing of healthcare services, and it's kind of a voodoo, and I'm afraid even public authorities do not understand costing. So I think there has to be a national consensus of costing of services, so that it's a matter of time. I can clearly see that thanks to COVID, there will be a greater push for private insurance, medical insurance policy. More people will suddenly decide that it's not really worthwhile to have no safety net at all, especially from the middle classes in the country. The below the poverty line at least have Ayushman Bharat to rely on. So I think that kind of change in the payer mix in the country will demand that there has to be a rationalization of service pricing among hospitals in the country, and that would be one small step to build or decrease the kind of deficit what we have. Last point is, I think it's somewhere important that it's sometimes very embarrassing when you go for meetings with colleagues in the public sector. There is it's a very perceived kind of a thing that, okay, because you are in the private sector, you are somehow a profiteer, you are somehow immoral. So this comes from that long legacy of socialism. I think there has to be greater dialogue and discourse to remove this kind of misperceptions within our polity, especially bureaucrats, politicians. Only then you can go to the Aam Aadmi and say that, listen, but we also have to do a lot of introspection, all of us in the private sector.
Thank you, Dr. Harish, for those valuable inputs. And this brings us to a close of the session. I'd like to thank Dr. Harish Pillai, Dr. Sanjeev Singh, Mr. Neeraj, Ms. Deepa, and Dr. Shabnam Singh for all your valuable inputs. It was interesting and a very insightful session, and I hope that participants also would have enjoyed listening to this discussion. Thank you all so very much. I'd like to thank the participants for registering with us and joining us today. Also, I'd like to thank the Voice of Healthcare, Dr. Naveen Nishal and his team for coordinating and for hosting this webinar. And special thanks to Ms. Pinky Chahar and Ms. Purnika from Voice of Healthcare for all the back-end coordination. Thank you all once again. Namaste. And due to time constraints, some of the questions we'll connect offline and we'll be answering those questions to the participants. Thank you all so much. Have a good day.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you.